Welcome to Looking into Cultures. Today we're going to have episode 2 of the Baltics, Resistance Through Culture. And we're going to show how the Baltic republics resisted the Soviet occupation and won their independence when the Soviet Union collapsed. We're going to talk about 4 forms of resistance: the singing revolution, the Hill of Crosses, folk dancing, and the human chain. I'm Cynthia Warren, your hostess. Hostess? And here's Frank, my host.
You're the hostess with the mostest, Cynthia.
Oh, thank you. How are you today?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Are you ready for some song and dance?
I am. And
this
first, can I
show
ask...
is going to be all song and dance.
Oh, great. Well, you look like you're ready to do a song and dance. Tell me about your hat.
Well, what do you think of it?
I think you were in Rome and you were to see the new Pope, Pope Leo. And did you swipe something from the Vatican? That's what I want to know.
You know, that's funny because this is actually a tea cozy that goes over the teapot from Bangladesh. It's hand embroidered. Okay. I was trying to put together a folk costume from odds and ends in my wardrobe, and I didn't have anything for my headgear. So I put this on and I thought, yes, this is it. And the odd thing is when I actually gave this to my mother, and one day she came out of the kitchen with it on her head and she said, "I'm the Pope."
Wow, well, it's timely, that's for sure.
Yes. So anyway, it's my folk headdress. All right.
You look great.
Great. Okay, well, anyway. Okay, so we're going to talk about the 4 forms of resistance.
Okay.
But we need a little background first. Mm-hmm. Okay, the first opening clip was a song festival that I witnessed last year in Klaipėda, Lithuania.
Okay.
And so these song festivals...
They were very much in sync. They all had on, each group had a different colored shirt, and they all were swaying together. You know.
And that's the whole point, is being in sync. Synchronicity, solidarity. That's my thesis for today's show.
Okay, good.
Is that all of these forms of resistance are things that relate to solidarity, because how do you resist the best if you have solidarity?
Yes, everyone is acting as one.
That's right. That's right. So we need a little bit of background on this.
Okay.
So when were the Baltics briefly independent? Do you remember, more or less?
They were independent
between
the World War I and II.
That's right. Between the world wars, they were briefly independent then. Okay, and then they were reoccupied by Stalin in 1940. So before that, they were the Russian Empire. Mm-hmm. Then briefly independent, then occupied by the USSR. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what allowed them to finally get their independence, do you think?
The breakup of the Soviet Union when Gorbachev was in power.
Okay, now Gorbachev, what did he do that was like quite different from his predecessors?
He let them honor their own customs and beliefs and religion, and he kind of was hands off, I guess you could say.
That's right. Okay, so he had a policy called glasnost.
Glasnost.
And it meant openness. And part of the reason he was doing this was because the Soviet Union wasn't doing good economically. Mm-hmm. And so he gave he rescinded limitations on political freedoms and allowed people to express themselves. Right. So what about the song festivals? Do you think that these song festivals started in 1869 in Estonia? That was during the Tsarist Empire.
Right.
Do you think the Tsar let them...
Only if they were doing something that was honoring the Tsar, like if it was his anniversary or his birthday, maybe, you know. At least honoring
the traditions of the Russian Empire.
Right.
It could be the Tsar's birthday. It could be the day of the incorporation of one of the Baltics into the Russian Empire. Okay, and this continued through the Soviet Union. So in other words, these song festivals were allowed to take place,
Right.
even though the Baltics were not free, and they were allowed to take place. So if you're allowed to sing your songs in your language and maybe in your costumes, what do you think that does for you?
Oh, it just makes you feel great, and it reinforces your heritage.
That's right. It reinforces your heritage. And that's how one of the ways they maintained their cultural identity during the Tsarist period and during the Soviet period. But it was not a form of dissidence, not at all.
Form of celebration.
Yes, a form of celebration, but again, within the context of the Russian Empire or the Soviet Union. However, when Gorbachev loosened things up, then the people began to agitate for independence.
Right.
They began singing national songs. They began singing forbidden songs. They began waving banned flags. And little by little, it gained momentum.
Right.
So
they got a taste of freedom and they wanted it to continue.
That's right. And of course, the Soviet Union was, in a period of transition where Gorbachev was very liberal. And the Baltics saw an opportunity, right? Let me just look at my notes for a moment and see if one thing is the Baltics were under the Russian Empire for 171 years. Not all of them at exactly the same time in terms of their entry. And then the Soviet period for the Baltic, the occupation of the Baltics was 1940 to 1991. So substantial amount of, like over 200 years of...
Yeah, they had just about had it, I think.
Yeah, so when they saw this opportunity, they started singing. And it started in Estonia, in Tallinn. They had the song festival, but then they suddenly started singing a banned song. I believe it was spontaneous in the sense that, yes, they were allowed to have the song festival, but in this case, they took it a little farther.
Okay.
And this began the singing revolution. I want to show you the clip of a song festival I saw in Klaipėda, Lithuania. Could we see the clip, Vilnius song? How many people do you think were there?
Hundreds, maybe thousands, and they're all in sync. And at the end, they're doing that chain of waving. It's very impressive.
Right, the human wave, yeah. There were many choirs there from different cities in Lithuania, and that's how they do it. So that particular choir was from Vilnius, which is the capital. Let me see. So that's about all about the song festival. So we have to say that they were used to maintain culture, traditions, national identity, and the language during times of foreign dominance, and then used as a way to protest and push for independence. Okay, that was our first form of resistance. We're going to fast forward to 2024 when I was in Tallinn, Estonia. Now, this was not a protest, but it's an annual assertion of belonging to Europe by Estonia as a member of the Hanseatic League. And the Hanseatic League was a trading group. It was a league of merchants in the European area. and they were in a legal framework which was called the Lubeck Rights.
Okay.
I think I'm pronouncing it wrong, Lubeck Rights. And so Estonia was admitted to this league, this Hanseatic League, which means they were granted Lubeck Rights, and they therefore became a member of the Union of European Cities. Okay?
Yes.
So they therefore consider themselves Europe, and they are in the EU now.
Right, right.
But they consider that they were in Europe since 776. Okay, so what about Putin's view of geopolitics, or even what is his view of geopolitics in regard?
Well, he
to
thought that
Baltics?
the breakup of the Soviet Union was pretty much a disaster,
That's right. He said it was the biggest
geopolitical disaster.
catastrophe of the century. Right. And so now with his actions in Ukraine, the Baltics believe what?
That they may be next.
Right. So that, that was a geopolitical disaster for Putin, and he has to correct the damage.
Right.
And get it back. Okay. So therefore, Estonia definitely wants to assert, no, we're European. Okay, so
Right.
on
Tallinn
Tallinn
Day.
Day, every year they celebrate the fact that they are they were in the Union of Europe, and they're in the European Union now. Could we see the clip, Tallinn?
Tallinn Day, May 15th, that's coming up. So that's only a couple of days from the day we're taping this show.
Yeah, day after tomorrow
So
will be Tallinn Day.
They'll be celebrating again and playing a lot of music, I imagine.
Yeah, I was really lucky to catch that music. Those cellists were just amazing, yeah. So the Baltics never felt that they were Soviet, okay, even though they were under the Soviets for 51 years,
Wow.
And so they celebrate the fact that they were part of Europe since 776. Okay, so that's all about Tallinn Day. We want to turn now to Lithuania and the Hill of the Crosses, another form of dissidence. Now, during the Soviet period, there was this hill covered with crosses. And what did I tell you about it?
Well, it was often bulldozed by the Soviet Union.
Several times.
Yeah. So, but it has been rebuilt, and
what about religion in the Soviet Union?
they weren't allowed to express their own religion. It was just not allowed.
Yeah, it was an atheistic state,
Right.
basically. Okay, and I had a friend in Siberia. She told me she had her children baptized secretly.
Wow.
During the Soviet period, and people did things like that. So the Lithuanians, they put hills on they put crosses on the
On the
hill,
hills.
and the Soviets bulldozed it at least 4 times.
Wow.
So we're going to see a clip of the Hill of Crosses, please. Did you see the Pope?
I did. Wearing a hat similar to the one you were in, a mitre. I
The
believe it's
mitre,
called.
yes.
Yeah.
But many of those sculptures are hand carved out of wood and very weathered.
Amazing
as you could
creativity.
See.
Yeah.
Yeah, and very poignant. So we're talking about folk art in these sculptures, but also now we're going to go on to folk dance. Okay. So the song festivals eventually evolved into song and dance festivals. This is our third form of resistance. And this is my theory. I mean, my personal theory is that resistance requires solidarity, real resistance. You can't do it alone.
No.
Right? Okay, so folk dancing is very symbolic of solidarity. Have you ever seen folk dancing or done it?
I've seen it many times on TV, or it's
Can you
on the Lawrence
describe-
Welk show, for example. They would do it a lot, and I mean over the years.
What kind?
Set to country music, and they're in a square dance.
So describe the movements of the square dance.
Well, they're changing partners, they're promenading. I mean, there's all these different terms that are used to describe it, but they're interacting with one another.
And what about the do-si-do?
The do-si-do is another one.
That's sort of the hand over hand when you go from one partner to the next all the way around the circle. Yes, yeah.
Very interactive with each other, though, and they're meeting other people probably as well.
Exactly. It's very social, and it's very unlike disco dancing, right?
Right.
What's
that's
that like?
Well, that's you're just pretty much swinging your arms and you're dancing with one person, if not just by yourself.
That's right. A lot of it's by yourself. You're just like this prancing pony, and really, that is so much the opposite. So we're talking about individualism versus collectivism.
Right.
Individualism is different from collectivism in this, that in individualism, supposedly, according to theorists, the group gets its strength from the individual. So the group is as strong as its individuals. Whereas in collectivism,
the group is more powerful and it empowers the individual.
The group empowers the individual. Very good, exactly. And so I want to show some examples of this. Could we have the folk dance club? That looks like so much fun.
And they were rehearsing. They didn't have their outfits.
It's actually just a club.
Oh, it's a club. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, they keep it alive by having the club. I also want to show how the individual gets its strength from the group.
Okay.
I happened upon a school, I think it was a end-of-year school performance of folk dancing in Sēsis, Latvia. And there was a girl in a wheelchair who was a dancer. And she was made the center of this swirl of dancers at the culmination of the song and the dance that was really beautiful. I call it the human vortex. Could we please see the human vortex? So do you see what I mean?
Yeah, they made her the center of the entire group.
So the individual gets its strength from the group.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think of the term circling the wagons in the cowboy movies. Do you remember that?
Yes, yes, I've seen a lot of westerns.
So what was circling the wagons?
Well, what they were doing is they were all acting as one to defend themselves.
So when the wagons circled, all the pioneers would be in the center,
Yeah.
and the wagons were surrounding them, and they could defend themselves. Yes, and so the girl in the wheelchair was at the very center of this human vortex, and the people were holding hands.
Yeah.
So it's a circle, it's holding hands. You know, I think this is all symbolic to me of solidarity as resistance. And in the Baltics, it was folk culture. It was the singing that was a great form of resistance, you know. So then let's talk about the solidarity. The fourth form of resistance was the human chain, which was called the Baltic Way. So what do you know about the human chain?
Was this about the anniversary of the Hitler-Stalin agreement?
This was done on the anniversary of that pact.
It's another form of resistance to
well,
this.
no, the date was chosen as the significant moment that the Baltics were forfeited to the Soviet Union.
Right.
Okay, so the Hitler-Stalin pact allowed Stalin to take over the Baltics, and so they chose that day to make a statement, we don't want this anymore.
Right.
You know? Okay, and so they made this human chain. Do you know how many people it was?
Thousands?
It was 2 million people.
2 million people?
2 million people.
Wow.
And the distance was 600 kilometers. So 2 million people held hands. And it
For how
took
long?
6 weeks to organize this.
How long did they do this for? I mean, because
They held hands for 15 minutes.
Wow.
So imagine, it takes 6 weeks to organize a human chain that holds hands, 2 million people over 600 kilometers for 15 minutes.
amazing, all of the people that participated in sync, and it took a lot of coordination.
And, you know, they used portable radios, walkie-talkies,
yeah.
and radio broadcasts, and the people would take, because they knew in advance where they were supposed to go, where they were supposed to stand, you know, and so it was not this, you know, haphazard thing that would have,
not with that many
the chain
people.
remained unbroken for those 15 minutes.
Wow.
So
Powerful.
This was called the Baltic Way. And we're going to see the clip called Solidarity, in which we will see both the Baltic Way, actual footage,
Okay.
as well as the dancing, because to me, all of that hand-holding is symbolic of resistance. Could we see Solidarity? So then in 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed.
Right.
And do you know anything about why or how it collapsed?
Well, it was, you know, Gorbachev being in power and just having more of a hands-off policy, and we talked about the words glasnost and perestroika.
Right.
So.
Okay, but the hardliners, the conservative hardliners, didn't like what Gorbachev was doing, so they did a coup against him.
Right.
But it failed.
It failed.
And this signaled the end of the Soviet Union, the collapse of the Soviet Union, yes. But there was a big pro-democracy movement going on at the same time in Russia, you know, and in the Soviet Union in general. So the hardliners' coup failed,
Right.
but somehow that triggered the collapse. You know, I don't really know all the ins and outs
Yeah.
of how these things transpire, you know. So of course, right now the Baltics are very nervous, and they are thinking about the possible invasion of Russia into the Baltics. So when I was in Latvia, I saw this wonderful cartoon which showed the folk culture as resistance again. But before we see that, we will see a partisan who fought against the Soviets during World War II. Could we see the Women Warriors clip? So she is a partisan of the Forest Brotherhood, fighting in the forest against the Soviets in World War II. And here's the cartoon that I saw in Riga, Latvia. So what do you see about these fighters?
Well, the women are holding guns, they're preparing for battle, and there's even one woman making a bomb.
Right, a Molotov cocktail. And how are the women dressed?
They're dressed in their traditional garb from their countries.
Exactly. And what about the padlock on the door?
That padlock represents the star of NATO.
That's right. So NATO, the door's locked and padlocked.
And look who's at the window.
NATO's the protection.
Russian bear is knocking on the window.
That's right. So they are barricaded in there with the NATO padlock against Russia, and they're ready.
Yeah, and a drill too, an automatic drill.
Yes, they're ready. And it's really interesting that Latvia has an epic poem that's called The Bear Slayer. And it has nothing to do with Russia at all. And yet there's a song, and I think it was even a rock opera that was written based on this epic poem, The Bear Slayer. And Russia is the bear.
Right.
But anyway, I ended my trip in the Baltics in Lithuania at the Midsummer Nights Festival, the only one I've ever been to. And so June 21st, right? Midsummer Night.
Right, beginning of summer.
Yes. And again, folk culture. So I saw folk choirs and folk dancing, and I want to share that a little bit of that with you. Can we see the folk choir? Well, I thought before you go, would you like a cup of tea?
I'd love some.
Okay.
You have any vodka or any type of
in my
liquor
boot.
from
I have
the
a
Baltics?
flask in my boot.
Oh, great.
Yes. Oh, no. I had a drink in the Baltics that almost killed me. It's called balsam.
Okay.
And it was cherry chocolate. It was a half a shot, and it almost killed me. I thought my kidneys were going to close down. I'm not kidding you.
Did they tell you to name your poison? Is that why it killed you?
No, it was cherry chocolate. It sounded so wonderful. Yeah. Here you have a cup.
Thank you.
Well, don't you want the saucer too?
Well, first, would you turn that over? I want to see what it says in the bottom of the saucer. Made in China?
No.
Made in USSR.
This is made in the USSR, and in fact, this was very common china that everybody bought during the Soviet period. But we are going to see one final clip of the night dancing at Midsummer Night's Dream, and I want at Midsummer Night's Dream at Midsummer Night's Festival, and I want you to notice that even when they're dancing in partners, they're still in a circle, because you can let go of your partner and you can hold hands with these people. And so the circle...
So you can mix it up a little bit.
The circle remains unbroken.
Great.
Could we see the last clip, please? you.
Cheers.
Cheers. That was just a wonderful, wonderful party. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching our second episode of the Baltics, Resistance Through Culture. And thank you, Frank, for accompanying me on this song and
always
dance
my pleasure.
festival.
Thank you for helping me look into cultures.
Okay, we'll see you next time in Looking into Cultures.
Chachumada